So, I've been really sporadic when it comes to making videos this year, and I've had many people ask me if I've died, or lost my mind, and technically yes I have, but if you haven't lost your mind this year, you're probably a bit sociopathic. But I wanted to talk to you guys about what's happened this year, and please bear in mind before you start this video that I'm going to go back about a year or so, and I'm going to be totally honest about everything that's happened. And a lot has happened. I'm also just lightly covering a lot of this stuff. I will fill you in on the full stories later. I just want to let you guys know why I disappeared for a year. I've had a really crazy past couple years. I've made some decisions that have completely altered the course of my life and how I look at things now compared to how I did even just 3 years ago. I've heard many people say that your 20s are when people find their path or at the very least grow the most. I feel like a completely different person in many aspects, and it's all because of these choices. The first choice is the obvious one. I told this story already, so I won't go too heavily into this, but I tried a psychedelic. A few of them actually, over the course of 2 years. I tried mushrooms first, then LSD and DMT, and as weird as it sounds, I learned a lot. Mostly about myself, and arguably only about myself. I discovered things about my reality that forced me to realize that living to make money was a trap. Working until I had a retirement plan or enough money to settle in. Working my whole young life and then getting to enjoy this credible experience called life at 50? 60? Yeah, no thank you. Thoughts like this were so freeing, and when I realized what it was these psychedelic compounds did was open the mind for such thoughts, I felt that in some way it was my responsibility to share this somehow. I didn't want anyone ever trying them because I did, nor did I want anyone thinking I recommend them, but for something to change my life like they had. These things in my mind had the potential to change the consciousness of the human race, if we just opened our minds and had more objective information out there regarding the compounds. I wondered how I could help in that aspect, and I developed an idea for a YouTube channel. The idea was to have guests on camera in an interview format. I'd set them down and have them share their stories about psychedelic compounds, who they were before, how they felt about those kinds of drugs and why they tried them, and how it affected them. Then, with willing participants, I'd allow them, only if they wanted, to take a psychedelic compound of their choice and let us document the experience. We could do this with people who never tried the substances. I had ideas to try it with groups of Christians and then again with groups of atheists, see how their worldviews and perceptions of others would change. I had been an atheist before I tried these things, and they ripped me right the hell out of it. The complexity of the situation I was in made it abundantly clear that I had no idea what was beyond me, and to pretend this plane of existence is it, and my species and I are the most important beings here, is a little ignorant. However, you say a thing like that and you sound a bit like a crazy person, which is annoying, and perhaps why I wanted to share so much what I learned. Maybe it was more about the validation that I wasn't crazy, which in itself is foolish because I'm not the only person who says these kinds of things after experiences like that. But either way, I had a problem with my lovely plan. If I were to try and make a YouTube channel like that, I'd be taken down for sure. Yeah, there are YouTube channels that talk about drugs, but I don't have enough passion for the substances to justify going to jail. I did, however, have enough passion for the mind, and I wasn't going to let a little thing like the law get in the way of progress. So I started looking up countries where the laws regarding these compounds were a bit more laxed. In my research, I found that Vietnam had no laws regarding psychedelics, which was enticing, as I'd visited there before, and I lightly knew Saigon. I was so excited, and in my haste, I ended up making some decisions that weren't completely thought through. So I wanted to have some help with the channel, so I invited a buddy from Falcon Northwest to come with me and be my camera guy. Now, I didn't really know this guy. We knew each other from work, but I never hung out with him other than that. He told me that if he went, his girlfriend would have to go as well, which I agreed to. Now, this is the part where things got uncomfortable, and I'll tell these stories in more detail later, but essentially my friends who came over with me had practically no money. They ran out very fast, and I ended up spending a lot in the first month because of that. I became really depressed, and I'd never gone through anything like that before. Every day I got one solid breath of air right when I woke up. Right after that breath, it felt like someone grabbed me and held me so tight that another full breath was impossible. I was stressing so hard about money and housing and making sure we all had jobs, and that was rough because my friend out there would fight me so hard on that. He'd tell me that he came to be a cameraman, and he had no interest in getting a job beyond that. I'd never been in a position like this before. Now, this is where things got really bad. I ended up finding out that while there are no laws regarding psychedelics in Vietnam, the cops will still take you down for it. Best case, deported with no ability to return. Worst case, they kill you. And I was absolutely not going to put myself or my friends at risk over a documentary series. This was a horrible turn for me though. I now realize that I was stuck with these people I didn't know in a country I wasn't familiar with, spending way more money than I anticipated, and I developed phobias. A fear of being misunderstood was the first one. I'd go out into the city and try to connect with others, try so hard to make friends, and nobody would be able to speak with me. If they did speak some English, it wasn't really enough to connect, and of the ones that were native English speakers, they never really took the time to get to know me. It's a busy city, I don't give a shit about this one damn kid, come on. But then I'd go home, and my roommates wouldn't want to talk to me, and if I tried to explain to them how I was feeling, they would just shut down. Too young to know how to help me. I was stuck. Now, in Vietnam, they have this street called VIEN. On this street, practically all drugs are legal. There are cops guarding the perimeters to make sure everyone is safe, and technically you're only supposed to drink, but if you do drugs there, you're pretty much good. In the bars, they sell nitrous oxide, more commonly known as laughing gas. Now, laughing gas is comprised of nitrogen and oxygen, which is currently the air you're breathing now, just in a higher concentration, and enough of it makes you laugh. I'd go to these bars at night, and I'd buy these huge-ass balloons full of nitrous oxide just so I could laugh again. I'd remember thinking things like, "Ah, man, Barry, you don't have to be so stressed all the time, just don't give so much of a shit." But then a side effect of laughing gas is memory loss, so those revelations weren't incredibly helpful. I don't even want to think about how much money I spent on balloons in Vietnam, and all to wrap a band-aid over my problems. One night, I'm in VIEN. It's probably about 9 o'clock, and these two Norwegian guys approach me. They sit down at my table, and we start to chat. Now let me set the scene here for you. We're outside, there are people everywhere, and the streets are filled with neon lights. The loudest and shittiest dubstep party music is playing in every bar, and they all overlap each other, and it echoes to the street, so it just sounds like hell. We're sitting at a table outside the bar on a sidewalk, and in one of my hands is a giant-ass balloon filled with laughing gas, and in the other, a joint. One of the Norwegian guys looks at me and makes conversation, asking me my name and how long I've been there. He asks how I'm like in Vietnam, and I looked back at him and said, "Well, I'm depressed." They both started laughing, and one of them said that he could tell. We chatted for a bit, and I shared my joint with them when I offered one of them a puff of the nitrous. The guy takes a puff and instantly disappears. The guy went blank completely and just sat there like he couldn't move. Just then, his friend gets a call from their boss, picks up the phone, and he gets all frantic. He tries to get his friend out of the chair, and he ends up standing him up and walking him away, and as he does, he turns back and looks at me with fear and sadness in his eyes, and with a shaky voice he says, "This is my brother." Now, mind you, I'd just gotten done taking quite a few puffs of this balloon, and instantly I had the most traumatizing trip that I've ever had. I imagined the two brothers were myself and my brother, and I imagined that stranger gave my brother that balloon, and how angry I would have felt. I threw all of that onto myself. It was an intense amount of guilt, and I already felt so much pain from the situation I'd been in with my roommates. There were a lot of other factors there in Vietnam, but once I came out of this trip, I was filled with fear. The depression was at full blast, and anxiety and triggers accompanied it. It's a touch annoying to call them that, but I legitimately experienced them. If I smelled latex or balloon, if I smelled cigarettes as VIEN was laden with that smell, if I drank a coffee and it altered my perception, actually anything that altered my perception would send me into a panic state like I'd never experienced before. I become very shaky, so much so that I wouldn't be able to unlock my door sometimes. I'd lose the ability to speak. I wouldn't even be able to say what was happening to me. I'd break down and cry often and hyperventilate just over one of these triggers. Every single day that went by got worse. It felt like someone added a pound of weights to the pile on my chest and shoulders every morning. I no longer remembered what it felt like to have a full breath of air. I'd have thoughts of hurting people, hurting my friends over the money situation, or hurting myself. Typically, it was less about pain and more about ending it. I'd think about sticking metal objects into light sockets or jumping off the back of a motorbike in heavy traffic, and the thoughts would scare me. I'd be scared because they'd bring comfort, and I'd never had my mind so twisted before. I knew something had to be done, and I knew what it was. This was decision number 3. The day after I took my first psychedelic, I researched non-stop for 2 years. I spent a lot of time researching Carl Jung, Terence McKenna, Timothy Leary, and any psychedelic research that had been done. I learned how effective these things were at curing trauma, depression, anxiety, addiction, and I'd been addicted to the nitrous oxide. Even though I'd been traumatized by it, I'd still go back sometimes because of that addiction. No matter who I told, though, and what I said, everybody was against the idea. I'd be told by my friends and family, "Barry, a drug did this to you. You can't use another one to fix it. And that was rational. It made sense to me, and I became afraid to take the thing that I believed in, that I'd spent a year researching, that I'd traveled to a foreign country to study. I became afraid in every single way, so afraid that research and logic didn't mean anything to me. That's not the Barry that I ever want to be again. Live afraid if you want to, guys, but it's a waste of my time. About 2 weeks went by and I found someone in Vietnam who sold LSD. I purchased some tabs from her and I just held on to them for another month. And every day got worse. Every day I became more and more afraid and more sad. I felt hopeless, and I purchased myself a plane ticket back to America. I figured I could at least quit, but my family wanted to visit, so I had to at least stay for 3 more months. If I could do that, then I could go home with them. It sounded perfect, so I bought a plane ticket and felt a whole lot of weight lift off me. Finally, it meant there was an end to this, and I wish I could tell you that I realized right then and there that the only time is now, and I stopped spending so much time being sad and scared because life is for living and not being worried. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, and just as quickly as that weight lifted, it was thrown back on the next day with more weight. Long story short, I had enough. I decided to trust myself instead and do the thing that I knew would work. I took a tab of LSD and went out into Saigon. This was the day that changed everything. So, I don't know how to explain LSD because to me it feels like it operates the way you do. For example, I'm ornery and I like to trick people and mess around with them. So this one time I take this stuff and my mind convinced me that the LSD was all of consciousness and that all of consciousness is all of reality, which means what was meant to happen was decided by this compound. I felt like the substance allowed me to realize something very important, and when I went to write it down, it tried to make me forget. For whatever reason, it felt like the LSD didn't want me to remember or share this specific piece of information with anyone. So I tried to write it down and make me forget, I'd remember, and it'd use external happenings to distract me. So I'm in the room trying to write this down, and my cat starts to meow. My mind then says I'm all of reality, and I decide what happens, and it led me to believe that if I actually wrote the realization down, it would kill my cat.
Guys, I'm having a weird time where I'm like stuck in a situation where if I spill some information about the universe, it might kill my cat. Like, it keeps leading me to believe that Sheridan will die if I tell people.
Now, I was laughing initially. I was like, you're not gonna kill my cat, you asshole, and then the cat started vomiting, which felt too pointed in the moment, and I got freaked out and erased the damn message. See, the thing is, this isn't an actual entity on your mind, it's just your mind playing tricks with itself. We have incredibly powerful minds, but I can see how weird that would sound if you've never experienced that. Either way, when it would do that kind of thing, I learned to realize that it was trying to scare me, and I can't be freaked out over things that I have no control over. Either way, back in Vietnam, I take the LSD and instantly every problem I have is blown up to an unfathomably overwhelming degree. Everything I've been struggling with, the trauma I'd been facing, the depression, the money, was all blown to such a ridiculous degree, and at first, it was the most painful thing I'd ever dealt with. There was all my fear right in front of me, and it didn't take long before I started laughing at it. The problems became so large that it was ridiculous. My hands were washed clean from realizing that I was the one who decided how large these problems were. I looked at myself in the mirror, and it was only when I saw myself smile that I got excited and screamed out, "Wait a minute! I remember you! I missed you so much, and I haven't seen you for so long!" It was nothing more than seeing myself genuinely happy again. From that day forward, I lived. I had an adventure every single day, and nothing was going to stop me from experiencing this beautiful country. 2 weeks later, my roommates decided to go back to America, and I got myself a more affordable place. I felt like I was home, but I was kind of bummed out because now I bought that plane ticket. I also still felt like I failed, which was weird. I mean, sure, my goal was to bring more objective research to psychedelics, but what I gained from my own experience was so much more than I could have ever filmed, I think. I learned how to trust myself, even if others think I'm evil or dirty for it. The rest of my trip was great, and I got home in January. Right after I got back, COVID hit, and I tried really hard to work on YouTube, but being locked inside all the time took its toll on my mental health. I decided that I needed to figure out what to do, and in order to do that, I had to leave YouTube behind for a while. Don't get me wrong, I love doing these videos, but I feel so connected to it that it stopped me from figuring out what I really wanted to do next. So I got myself a job and I've been working there since. Now I do kind of wish I was back in Vietnam, but I'm very happy that I made it back here before COVID hit. The major reason is because my childhood cat, Sheridan, who I picked out when I was 5, died just a couple months ago. He was 19 years old, and had I missed his death, I don't think I would have handled it well. As for what I'm doing next, this is the part that I'm most excited for. I'm currently searching for a vehicle, a van, an RV, a bus, something that I could turn into a bedroom on wheels. I'm going to save up for a few months and take my bus across America. I want to see this country, and when I get tired of it, I'm going to sell the bus and take off back to Nam. While I do this, I have a lot of opportunity to do YouTube on the road, but I completely changed the BulletBarry thing to a vlog style channel. I know there are a lot of you who want the tech stuff to come back, but it's time to evolve. I love tech, but I love living more, and experiencing new things is my ultimate passion that I hope I'll never grow tired of.